is DW News coming to you live from Berlin. Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu fights for his political survival. Partial results show the election is too close to call, with Netanyahu unable to secure a majority against his rival Benny Gantz. Could this be the end of the Netanyahu era? Also on the programme, European leaders issue a warning to Britain. The risk of the UK leaving the EU without a deal is very real, and Brussels will not pretend to negotiate. And in sport, Germany's Borussia Dortmund draw with mighty Barcelona as the Champions League group stages kick off. Bayern Munich begin their campaign tonight. Hello and a very warm welcome to you. I'm Amrita Chima. The future of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is hanging in the balance. Partial results from the country's election show Netanyahu's Likud party in deadlock with the blue-white party of the centrist Benny Gantz. So far, neither side has declared victory, but the results could mark the beginning of the end for Netanyahu. He's Israel's longest-serving Prime Minister. More on that in just a moment, but first we have this report for you.
If he was disappointed on election night, Benjamin Netanyahu wasn't showing it. Far from conceding defeat, Israel's longest-serving president took to the stage vowing to remain at the helm, with a Likud-led government that excluded Arab parties.
In the coming days, we will convene negotiations to assemble a strong Zionist government and to prevent a dangerous anti-Zionist government.
Netanyahu's plans may well be thwarted by opposition leader Benny Gantz. He stopped short of declaring an election win, but his address to supporters certainly had the tone of a victory speech for his blue and white party.
According to the initial results, Netanyahu did not succeed in his mission. We, on the other hand, proved that our idea called Blue and White, a project we established just over 6 months ago, is a huge success and here to stay.
This man immediately cast himself as kingmaker, Avigdor Lieberman. The backing of his secular right Yisrael Beitenu party will be vital to the formation of any governing coalition.
We have just one option: a broad liberal unity government formed of Yisrael Beitenu, Likud, and blue and white.
Voters defied predictions of fatigue and turned out in larger numbers than the last poll in April. Now they want a path forward. Many say after 10 years in power, it's time for Netanyahu to go.
Netanyahu has probably run his course, and his time has passed.
In the end, Netanyahu is like a phoenix. When we think he's finished, he rises up again. But I really hope that the government will change.
I think he was a good leader, but I think it's about time to end a chapter or a period.
Benjamin Netanyahu's political survival is on a knife edge. Long deemed a political wizard, this election may turn out to be the one that broke his spell.
And for the very latest, let me draw in DW's Tanya Kramer. She's standing by in Jerusalem for us. Tanya, calling this election was quite a political gamble, and it doesn't seem to have paid off for Netanyahu.
Well, the reading here is as well that it weakened Netanyahu more than he probably thought. He is still shy of those 61 seats he needed, together with the potential coalition partners, to get a majority. And he seems to be now in a weaker position, but we are still also have to say it is a bit too early to say, because we're still waiting for the preliminary results. polls. It takes a bit longer than usual. The election commission says they're expecting this afternoon. And we have also to say that both bigger parties, also Blue and White, are not in the position to attain those 61 seats. So it is still to see as we speak. There are a lot of talks ongoing who could be a potential coalition partner. So we have to wait and see how this will play out.
Yeah, while we wait to see how it's going to play out, the political gamble seems to have paid off for Avigdor Lieberman. He's now in the role of kingmaker. What's known of his plans? Would he be open to an alliance, say, with Benny Gantz's Blue and White party?
Well, it was expected that he would be the kingmaker. He was the cause that, Netanyahu failed to build the last coalition. They were actually quite close allies before. He was also defense minister under Netanyahu, but then stepped down. And he was expected, that he would gain more seats in all the polls before the elections that showed us that he could be the potential kingmaker. And he has said very clearly, we heard it also in the report, that he would like to see a liberal unity government. What he means by that, a government comprised of Likud, Israel Beiteinu, and Blue and White. And he also set out, his demands already, how we would like to go forward with this.
Right, Tanya Kramer in Jerusalem. Thank you very much. Let me now bring you up to date with some other stories making news around the world. Officials in the US say they have evidence that Saturday's attacks on Saudi Arabia's oil facilities originated in Iran. The unnamed sources told the Reuters news agency that the strikes involved drones and cruise missiles. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is on his way to Saudi Arabia to discuss a possible retaliation. Clashes have broken out in Ecuador's capital, Quito, after lawmakers voted against decriminalizing abortion in cases of rape. Police responded with tear gas when angry protesters tried to tear down barricades around the legislature. Women in Ecuador who obtain an abortion face prison sentences of up to 2 years. Teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg has met a former US President Barack Obama, who helped broker the 2015 Paris Climate Accord. He praised her as an influential environmental advocate. Thunberg is set to take part in Friday's global climate strike in New York. The European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker says a deal to ensure a smooth British exit from the EU is still possible, but warned that the risk of a no-deal Brexit is very real. At the European Parliament in Strasbourg, Juncker said no deal would never be the choice of the European Union. The EU's chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, said the two sides would also not pretend to be negotiating. DW's Max Höfmann joins me from Strasbourg, where the European Parliament has been meeting. So, Max, what was the key message coming out from there? Any decisions made at all?
It was not a new key message. It's a twofold key message that we've heard before, but I say urgency is still growing. So the first message, of course, is that everybody said that a no-deal Brexit is getting more likely. Some of the parliamentarians even said that they believe this is now by far the most likely scenario. So it was a little surprising that at the same time, Jean-Claude Juncker, as you just mentioned, and Rita, the head of the European Commission, said that there was still time for a deal, that a deal could still be struck. And that's important because Jean-Claude Juncker is the last of the top EU officials to have met Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, on Monday in Luxembourg. And it wasn't really clear what happened there. So maybe there was something that gave him some hope, but this hope is not widely shared.
So is there any chance that the EU could take a step towards Boris Johnson and agree to some kind of tweaks to the agreement which could work for both sides?
That would have to be the backstop. So the now infamous insurance policy to avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, and the Republic of Ireland, which is part of the European Union. And Boris Johnson wants nothing to do with that. So the EU would have to move there. The willingness to do that is very limited, especially because nobody knows if he would have a majority for that in Parliament. That's not even in session at the moment because he put it on a forced vacation. And that's why, I'm not the only one to ask myself here, so why this shimmer of hope in what Jean-Claude Juncker said? Why are they not completely excluding actually a deal? And I asked that question Philip Lamberts, who's the representative of the Greens in the Brexit steering group of the European Parliament. I asked him specifically, why aren't they saying there really is no hope for a deal from the side of the European Union? And this is what he had to say.
They cannot be seen as giving up on the possibility of a deal, because that would play into Boris Johnson's hands. What is the strategy of the Prime Minister? My understanding is this, is that Boris Johnson wants to take the United Kingdom out of the European Union without a deal. But he wants to do that keeping the ability to lay the blame on the European Union. So he must appear as if he's negotiating in good faith to get an agreement, but these bloody Europeans will not budge.
So, Max, if that is indeed Boris Johnson's strategy, where do you see this going from the EU perspective?
Well, the so-called bloody Europeans, as Philip Lambert said, feel that the ball is still in the camp of the UK. I think the most likely scenario at the moment, but don't nail me down on it in a couple of weeks because things just change, is that this automatic extension will kick in that the House of Commons required in one of its last actions. So there might be this extension, then snap elections in the UK, and then you really don't know what will happen after that.
It is a very complex and complicated story. Max Hoffmann in Strasbourg, thank you so much for bringing us up to date with the latest developments from there. The man who called a referendum on Brexit in the first place is former Prime Minister David Cameron. He campaigned to remain in the EU, but as we now know, he failed to convince voters. Critics have since accused him of plunging the UK into an avoidable crisis. But Cameron has defended his decision and has now written a book to try and retake control of the narrative.
David Cameron on his way out of office in 2016.
Right.
Humming a merry tune as he announced he was handing over the reins and leaving behind a merry mess. He put Brexit to a referendum, urged Britons not to leave the EU, and lost, and then promptly disappeared. British politics and society devolved into a standoff over Brexit, but Cameron stayed silent, until now.
Well, I'm deeply sorry about all that's happened. There isn't a day that goes by when I don't think about all the decisions I made and all that has followed. But when I go back to that decision that Britain's position needed to be sorted and we needed a renegotiation and a referendum, I believe then that was the right approach.
So, the right thing to do, sorry about how it turned out. The referendum was widely seen as a response to pressure from Eurosceptic members of the Conservative Party. Cameron's memoirs are an attempt to take back control over the narrative and his legacy. Just a few journalists had access to the book before publication. Andrew Billen of The Times had 10 hours to read the 750-page tome. And he wasn't allowed to take notes.
I think he really wants to put his case before history, before the obituary writers when the times comes, so at least people will have his side of the story. And it's very well told, it's engagingly told, he emerges quite humanely from it, it's got a colourful turn of phrase. He's really put the best possible case he can on what is a failed political career.
Cameron's legacy may be in tatters, but that's given him a certain freedom to take swipes at former rivals, like current Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Once they were on the same team, friends even. Then Johnson announced he was not supporting Cameron's campaign to stay in the EU.
And I said, Boris, you've never been in favour of leaving the EU. So why, now there's a better deal on offer, are you in favour of leaving now? He thought that the Brexit vote would be lost, but he didn't want to give up the chance of being on the romantic, patriotic, nationalistic side of Brexit. And I thought it was actually from his...
Cameron accuses Johnson of being an opportunist. This from a man who pinned his own career on the Brexit referendum. In an interview, Johnson played down any disagreements.
Talking about having a Queen's speech, I have the highest respect and affection and regard for him. He and I worked together for many years.
The good old days of working together, now gone forever.
A surge of anti-foreigner violence is taking its toll on South Africa's biggest city, Johannesburg. That's in addition to an economic downturn already hurting the country. Businesses are keeping their doors closed and visitors are cancelling trips to one of the city's most popular areas because of the recent unrest.
The Johannesburg inner city has been rocked by 2 weeks of violence. Angry mobs looting and destroying anything in their path, with foreign-owned businesses bearing the brunt of their anger.
There is nothing that has sparked any form of this conflict between South Africans and the foreign nationals. So we're dealing with criminality rather than xenophobia at the present moment.
Whatever it is, the effect has been devastating on Maboneng, an inner-city hub for tourism, culture, cuisine and entrepreneurship.
This is what the damage looks like, and there's a big crowd of people just throwing stones, bricks.
Businesses have seen a significant drop in visitors since the unrest began, putting serious pressure on the hospitality and tourism sectors, which rely on the city's estimated 5 million annual visitors.
How are we going to sustain these two industries through the chaos? That always worries me, that always stresses me out.
Police have increased their numbers on the ground, conducting raids and patrols across Johannesburg.
We want to make sure that what happened last time where people were looting shops, it doesn't happen again, or it doesn't spread to other areas. We will be remaining in all the hotspots or in all the areas that were affected until we are sure that everything is back to normal.
Analysts argue the damage is already done.
This city is the most unequal in the world, and it took a long time to begin to get people in the middle class to go and, say, eat on sidewalks at restaurants and go out in the town. And this definitely is a psychological barrier to continuing the reintegration of class and race in our awfully divided cities. It's a tragedy.
And it's not only restaurants, hostels, bars and hotels feeling the pinch. Inner city commerce is taking a serious hit.
I just have this feeling they might come back. My customers are scared. They've been calling me. They cannot come and collect their stuff. Some of their stuff has been damaged. So Maboneng is never going to be the same again.
Although authorities claim the situation is slowly normalizing, the unrest has already cost 12 lives, and the city of gold remains on edge.
Turning now to New York, which has become the second state in the US to ban flavored e-cigarettes. The Democratic governor called for the emergency action in response to concerns about a nationwide spate of lung illnesses. But as we report, the decision has some business owners angry.
They promised to help tobacco addicts quit. Instead, millions of American high schoolers are now hooked on e-cigarettes, and no one is quite sure how harmful they are. Doctors call the craze a ticking time bomb. Now, New York State has moved to defuse it, banning flavoured versions.
Names like bubblegum, cotton candy, Captain Crunch, which was my favorite. These are obviously targeted to young people.
The people selling the e-cigarettes are fuming. They have 2 weeks to offload vast quantities of their fruity stocks before the ban comes in.
When I heard about it, it was like very troublesome. It's going to affect a lot of business, that's for sure. And second thing, all my regular customers who are coming every day, they are very disappointed with the news.
Across the states, the race is on to crack down on vaping, triggered by a spate of related deaths and illnesses, especially affecting young people. Around 1 in 4 high school students uses e-cigarettes, and that number is rising. Donald Trump has said a nationwide prohibition is forthcoming.
I just want to say that we have a problem in our country. It's a new problem. It's a problem that nobody really thought about too much a few years ago, and it's called vaping, especially vaping as it pertains to innocent children. And they're coming home and they're saying, "Mom, I want to vape."
One leading health professional says action is badly needed.
So right now we have an open field where anything goes. People are playing Russian roulette with their bodies every time they purchase.
Those profiteering from the purchases say these latest moves will only push people back towards more harmful tobacco cigarettes.
Turning now to football and the Champions League. Last night, the European competition kicked off with two German clubs and the holders in action. Jonathan Crane from DW Sports Desk is with me. Welcome, Jonathan. So Dortmund and Barcelona was a big match. Tell us about that.
It was, and it didn't disappoint, even though it finished goalless. I think you can say it was a good 0-0. That sometimes happens in football now, where Dortmund got a bit of a psychological boost before the game even started because Barcelona's star player Lionel Messi was on the bench, still recovering from a calf injury. And really, they were the dominant side, Amrita. But unfortunately, that man there, Barcelona keeper Marc-Andre ter Stegen, was in their way all night. He made some great saves, especially from captain Marco Reus. And in fact, 10 minutes into the second half, Marco Reus had his penalty saved by ter Stegen. It looks like it's gone in, but it hasn't actually. He managed to claw the ball up in the air. Now, ter Stegen has been involved in a bit of a war of words with Manuel Neuer about who should be Germany's number one. Ter Stegen frustrated, he's on the bench. Neuer saying basically you should shut up. But I think ter Stegen really staked his claim with that performance. Marco Reus, we saw in the last picture, very disappointed. He thinks Dortmund should have won the game.
I think we were very close to the win. In the second half, we had lots of good chances and were in control. We didn't allow Barcelona many opportunities. So it's bitter that we didn't make the second half count.
As you can see, I'm in Dortmund colours, Jonathan. Just a happy coincidence, let me assure you. OK, now contrasting results for holders Liverpool and Bundesliga leaders Leipzig.
Exactly. Liverpool, the holders, had a tricky away match in Naples against Napoli. They lost 2-0, were very sloppy with their chances. Napoli made them pay 2 late goals there. Good win, though, for RB Leipzig. 2 goals from Timo Werner. Can't seem to score for Germany, but he can't stop for Leipzig. And they're at the bottom. FC Salzburg, another Red Bull-linked club. They beat Genk 6-2, an incredible win for them. And they play Liverpool next, so that's going to be a tricky match for Jurgen Klopp's side.
And looking forward to tonight's match, Bayern are in action, and who do they play? Yeah,
they kick off their campaign tonight against Red Star Belgrade. Now, on paper, this is probably the easiest match for them, but they've not had a very good start to the Bundesliga season. And as we'll see, they do have an injury concern in defence as well.
Bayern's tune-up for their Champions League opener has been far from smooth. A 1-1 draw with Bundesliga rivals RB Leipzig at the weekend also saw defender David Alaba injured. That means veteran Jerome Boateng is back in the lineup. Captain Manuel Neuer remains confident.
Jerome's always given his best. He's played well and has a lot of experience. I've been at Bayern with him since 2011. And I'm obviously glad to have had him on my side all these years and feel very safe with him in defense.
Another challenge for Bayern is where to play Felipe Coutinho. The Brazilian playmaker has had a stuttering start to the season with no goals so far and only came on as a late substitute against Leipzig.
He likes to play the number 10 role. That's his sweet spot. We'll try to give him that chance. We'll give it his all offensively as well as defensively. And I know that if he gets to play, he'll perform well.
Exactly how and if Coutinho will fit into Niko Kovac's game plan remains to be seen. Bayern would do well to start their Champions League campaign with a win in a group that, aside from a determined Red Star team, also includes last year's runners-up Tottenham.
So the big question, Jonathan, what are you expecting from the defending champions league, from the Bundesliga?
Well, nothing less than a win, really. As I said, Red Bull are the weakest team. It's only going to get more difficult for them. They did play in the Champions League last season, were awful away from home. They lost all 3 of their games, conceded 13 goals in the process. Obviously, Bayern haven't had the best start to the Bundesliga season. They've drawn 2, 1-2 as well. Robert Lewandowski, though, 7 goals already. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't get on the score sheet tonight. I think Bayern should be expected to win quite easily.
Okay, the words of Jonathan Crane from DW Sports Desk. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories. Israeli election results show Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party is deadlocked with the blue-white party of centrist Benny Gantz. That raises the possibility of a unity government or even the end of Netanyahu's rule. Officials in the US say they have evidence that Saturday's attacks on Saudi Arabia's oil facilities originated in Iran. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is on his way to Saudi Arabia to discuss a possible retaliation. Clashes have broken out in Ecuador's capital, Quito, after lawmakers voted against decriminalizing abortion in cases of rape. Women in Ecuador who obtain an abortion face prison sentences of up to 2 years. Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg has met former US President Barack Obama. He praised her as one of the planet's greatest advocates. Thunberg is set to take part in Friday's global climate strike in New York. This is DW News from Berlin. You can always find the latest headlines at dw.com. Before we go, here's time to show you footage of a huge water spout in southwestern China on Tuesday. The rare phenomenon is caused by a tornado passing and picking up a column of water and mist. Meteorologists say a water spout usually moves in a straight line with an average speed of 50 kilometers an hour. That's it from me, Amrita Chima, and the news team. But do stay with DW. Monica Jones is with you soon. She has the business news on planned trade talks between the US and China. That's coming up shortly on DW.
Time to fix the forests. Climate change and greedy timber companies have taken a toll on forests all around the world.
When you are a climate activist,
can new forest management techniques prevent a catastrophe? Modernizing a key part of the Earth's environment.
Made in Germany in 60 minutes on DW.
Město je rozpůlenou švestkou v cukrovém nálevu.
Už
několik hodin jdou pomalu, jen se plouží. Padavé ovoce.
DW Books on YouTube.
What's the connection between bread and the European Union? He knows. Georg Mattes, DW correspondent and avid baker.
You can't stretch this back in line with the rules set by the EU. Deep and long cuts. Mais non.
Swapping recipes for success. Strategies that make a difference. Breaking Bread on DW.
On the green
Hi, I'm Neil.
And I'm Gabe.
And we've got a brand new DW Environment podcast.
It's personal, it's divisive,
and it's about topics that affect us all.
Water pollution,
climate change,
and the return of the wolf.
On the Green Fence.
Check it out.
The US and China are back at the negotiating table. A Chinese delegation is headed for Washington to discuss the way forward. Our correspondent in Taipei has more. Also coming up, Chinese demand for pork sauce. But German pork farmers don't feel like celebrating. We tell you why. And 8 years of civil war have crushed the Syrian pound, and with it, the economy. Welcome to DW Business. I'm Monica Jones in Berlin. Good to have you with us. A Chinese delegation is on its way to Washington for preliminary talks aimed at paving the way for next month's trade negotiations. Deputy Finance Minister Liao Min will be leading the Chinese team. The stakes are high for both sides after previous attempts to come to an agreement to end the trade war failed. The two countries have imposed hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs on each other's goods, hurting manufacturers and farmers in particular. For more, let's bring in our Asia correspondent in Taipei, Zhu Zhonghan. So the latest economic data shows the trade row is hurting China a little bit more than the United States, for now at least. What's that mean for China? Is Beijing the negotiating position? Is it a one of weakness?
Well, not necessarily, because there's a different understanding on the Chinese side. Even though now more people in China feel the material effect of tariff on Chinese economy are real and the situation is getting worse, but still many believe that the economic figures will not look good anyways, even without the trade war, because the Chinese economy has come to a stage of transformation. At the same time, they watch really closely on U.S. economies, which has shown signs of recession. So if we look at it this way, China will want to do something benefit the both sides, but there's no way they will give ground on their economic advantage or national policy just for the recent data.
Of course, those talks this week aim to prepare the next high-level meeting in October. What are the chances we'll have a breakthrough there?
Well, after 14 months of a trade war, I think both sides realize it's almost impossible to reach a final perfect deal. So that's why this time that both sides are considering an interim deal. And in this temporary deal, both sides might agree on some controversial items. For example, China might agree to buy more U.S. farm products, opening its market, strengthening IP protection or legal protection of U.S. companies. And both sides can move forward from these controversial items.
All right, Zhu Zhonghan, they're reporting for us from Taipei. Thank you so much. China is to auction off 10,000 tons of imported frozen pork held in government reserves. The move comes as the country grapples to deal with an outbreak of African swine flu that's seen farmers lose 100 million pigs. Companies will be able to buy a maximum of 300 tons of meat each. Now, this comes as German pork exports to China are booming. Prices are going through the roof. Pig farmers love it. For the first time in years, they're turning a profit. But they won't get rich. Authorities demand farmers to invest in a more animal-friendly environment. And for many small business, this kind of investment is simply too much.
They're busy in the cold storage unit at the Simon Slaughterhouse in Rhineland-Palatinate. These pork carcasses are being exported to China. Since April, deliveries have sharply increased. African swine fever is rampant in China at the moment. It's estimated that around 200 million pigs had to be culled.
In all of Europe, there are currently around 136 million pigs. Just compare the numbers. If all of Europe were to sell every last pig to the Chinese, we still wouldn't be able to close the demand gap.
Farmer Dirk Schulze-Pellinger has profited from the increasing exports. He sells his piglets for the highest price in years. But he's still not happy about it, as new laws on animal welfare and environmental protection are pending. For example, sows are to be given twice as much space. For the farmer, it means cutting the pig population in half or increasing the size of the stables. That could cost up to €5,000 per stall.
With higher costs and fewer benefits, we're supposed to invest. It's incomprehensible, especially since it's not known if the African swine fever problem in China will be solved. If it is, then it's not certain what will happen next. Prices will go down and we'd have to compete massively on prices with other countries. That'd cause other big problems.
Many farmers, like Hendrik Beische, don't want to invest in new stables compliant with new animal welfare and environmental protection regulations. Beische chose to give up his farm. All his pigs have been sold and the arable land leased. To remain competitive, he would have to take out a loan to build a new stable. The 40-year-old hesitates to make new investments.
That's a lot. It's not that easy to invest €1 million. There are so many regulations you have to comply with.
Around 2,200 pig farmers have given up in the past 2 years. To meet the demand, Bernhard Simon is buying pigs from France and Belgium. In Spain, the number of pigs has even increased by 4%.
In Spain, pig farming has a social value. It's an important economic sector. As a rule, the requirements are not as strict as they are here, so of course more pigs will be kept there than here.
A paradox. In a period of extremely high prices for pork, farmers are insecure about the planned animal welfare and environmental legislation. It's making them reluctant to invest at all.
And now to some news that could leave you feeling a little deflated. The world is facing a shortage of helium. Most of us know it as the gas that fills up party balloons, but it's also got a whole host of other more important uses. It is needed for deep-sea diving. It's also used to conduct MRI scans and to make semiconductor chips. So why are we running out? Well, to find out, we need to look at the world's two biggest helium producers. That is the United States and the tiny nation of Qatar, somewhere down here. Together, they're responsible for producing 75% of the world's helium. But separate issues are threatening supply. One is a law dating back to 2013 that requires Amarillo in Texas, where the so-called Federal Helium Reserve is located, to exit the helium business by 2021 in order to pay off debt. The other big reason is due to the economic embargo on Qatar. It dates back to 2017 and it's led to the closure of helium plants and an interruption to global supply. Now, these factors have led to a surge in prices for helium and warnings from scientists that supplies could run out. To talk more about this, I'm joined now by Ashutosh Pandey, who is joining me in Frankfurt. Ashutosh, how could this shortage of helium impact the German economy?
Well, Monica, unfortunately, there is not enough information available as to how it is impacting the German economy or the German industry. I spoke to the Linde Group, which is the world's largest supplier of industrial gases, and they also refuse to comment on the shortage. I know for sure that a unit of Linde Group has warned that the shortage could lead to delays in fulfilling orders. And we can just go by the usage of helium gas and its widespread use in the healthcare industry. And by going by just that, we could safely assume that it could be the likes of Siemens and Philips, which could actually be hurt.
And how can companies like Philips or Siemens prepare for this shortage?
Well, many companies have been stockpiling already. In fact, during a helium auction in the US August last year, helium prices shot up by more than 100%. That was mainly to do with companies actually stockpiling and building their reserves. Having said that, it's not the first time that the world is witnessing a helium shortage. It's in fact the third in the past 14 years. And things are likely to improve by next year when supplies from Algeria, Qatar, and eventually in 2021 from Russia hits the market, provided the Middle East remains stable, because a third of helium supplies comes via the Hormuz Strait.
Indeed. Ashutosh Pandey, they're reporting from Frankfurt. Thank you so much. Now, 8 years of civil war have crushed the Syrian currency. Back in 2011, you paid 50 Syrian pounds for $1. Today, the official rate is above 200 Syrian pounds to $1. But money is scarce, pushing up prices on the black market. The crash against major currencies has made doing business in the war-torn country a huge challenge.
Surrounded by the scent of his spices, Mohammed Zarqawi is growing more desperate by the day. He knows when he lies down to sleep in the evening that prices will have changed by the time he wakes up. The variation of the exchange rate means that when I want to buy 50 kilograms of this or that product, I lose 10 kilograms, and I'm only able to buy 40 kilograms for the same price. There's no stability. So it's smart to wait a bit to buy, but if you wait, your store slowly empties out. The Syrian pound has also been hammered by the relentless years of war, the sanctions in place against the Assad regime, and civilians transferring money out of the country en masse throughout the conflict. On the black market, a dollar now costs around 650 Syrian pounds, 13 times its price 8 years ago. The value of the dollar is increasing all the time. Prices change every hour. So the customer who came yesterday and bought something at such and such a price can come back today and have to pay more for the same thing. So everything is growing more expensive, including necessities like food. Many Syrians now hoard dollars, hoping to shield themselves if their pound falls even further.
Investors in the US are waiting to find out if the Federal Reserve will cut interest rates for a second time this year. Factors affecting the decision include the outlook for global trade, the potential disruption to the oil market caused by the attacks on refineries in Saudi Arabia, and the latest manufacturing figures. Although an independent government agency, US President Donald Trump has recently put pressure on the Fed to lower interest rates. And we'll have more on the Fed's decision later in the day. For now, that's it from DW's Business Desk, from me and the team here in Berlin. Thanks for watching.
is quite as simple as it seems. To understand the world better, we need to take a closer look. Experience knowledge. Tomorrow Today on DW. Come along and follow the adventures of the famous naturalist and explorer. To celebrate Alexander von Humboldt's 250th birthday, we're embarking on a voyage of discovery. Expedition Humboldt on DW.
Hi there and welcome to news from the world of arts and culture. Winners of this year's Premium Imperiale, known as the Nobel Prize for the Arts, were announced on Tuesday, and there's a German in the mix, so we'll hear more about that and also feature these stories. Good Night Stories for Rebel Girls, 100 Tales of Extraordinary Women, is a bestseller in over 40 countries, and one of its authors, Francesca Cavallo, will join me in the studio. And Connecting Afro Futures, an exhibition at Berlin's Museum for Decorative Arts, is dedicated to the complex and versatile world of African hair and fashion design.